2007 marked the 25th anniversary of the Falklands War. In April 1982, Britain sent a task force 8,000 miles to the South Atlantic to seize back the islands from its Argentine invaders. It was a short, brutal conflict that cost hundreds of lives, but in the end, Britain's armed forces prevailed. As part of this year's Remembrance Sunday commemorations, over 200 Falklands War veterans returned to the islands, many for the first time since the conflict, in a pilgrimage organised by their association, Summer 82. Among their number were 67 combat stress patients who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. They made the difficult journey back to the South Atlantic in the hope they could finally lay to rest the memories that have haunted them. This film will follow these pilgrims during their 7-day journey as they revisit the battlefields where they fought, enjoy the islanders' warm welcome, and remember their lost comrades. It's early November at the Union Jack Club in London. With the pilgrimage leaving for the Falklands the next morning, a reception is being held for all the pilgrims. Many veterans are seeing old friends they haven't seen for 25 years. It's a chance to catch up, swap stories, and remember lost comrades.
These guys have now got 7 or 8 days together ahead of them. As you say, some are meeting each other for the first time for 25 years. Others may have been in contact during the intervening period. And then others are meeting new people completely. And with the mixture of ships, of army units, RAF and families, it's a terrific social occasion really, at the same time as being a very poignant one. And I've seen a few people tonight already having a little bit of difficulty with the prospects that lie ahead. So it's not plain sailing for everybody, even though it's a very convivial feeling atmosphere at the moment.
Guest of honour is Baroness Thatcher, who was Prime Minister at the time of the invasion and who sent these men and women to fight. It was a huge political gamble, but she was convinced her armed forces would win, and many of these veterans have never forgotten her faith in them. Keith Burton, known to everyone as Paddy, served with 40 Commando during the conflict and has since suffered with PTSD. Music is his great passion and therapy, and Thatcher's presence is a perfect excuse to play the pipes.
Of course, piping for Maggie Thatcher, you know, she's a big celebrity, of course, in everybody's eyes, but everybody's a big celebrity here. Everybody has suffered, and everybody needs a little bit of healing. And so I'm getting really something out of this, and so will everybody else.
Going away now, safekeeping.
Veterans from all 3 of the armed services are here tonight, and by tomorrow they will be back in the Falklands, some for the first time since the war.
I feel very privileged and very honoured to be selected to go back to the islands for the 25th anniversary, and I'm looking forward to going back and meeting the islanders. But for me personally, having been there in the part of the conflict, I want to now meet the islanders and hear their story.
It's very, very daunting. I don't know whether I want to go, but I feel I've got to go, if you get what I mean.
It is my first time back, yeah, a little bit nervous, but you're amongst friends and everyone has experienced lots of different things, so I think it'll be a worthwhile experience. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
We've got some really good mates here, somebody we can actually turn to, actually talk to, and I think that's going to help a hell of a lot.
It was a politician's war, but the people on the ground fought the war. So for me, it's a case of, I think we were right to do it. I have great pride in what I did, and by fighting it, and great pride for everyone else that took part in it. But it was a case of we did the right thing at the right time. So all of Margaret Thatcher, what she stood for, Britain, national pride, yeah, I'm all behind it.
Thank you, ma'am, and to our other guests for honouring us with your presence tonight as we embark on our journey.
We were one of the first ships down in the Falklands, and we were one of the last ships down there, and the only ship to actually survive an Axis attack. We lost 13 crew members at the time and one later on.
The only ship not to have a permanent memorial in the Falklands. We're all going back to the Falklands for our own reasons, as everybody else here is. But all we want to do when we're down there is obviously go for our own feelings, but we also want to canvass for a permanent memorial for HMS Glamorgan.
It's not just the veterans who will be making this trip. Joining them will be a small number of wives, parents, children and other loved ones who have their own personal reasons for going.
I'm the eldest son of Gareth Griffiths, Griff 22 for the guys who remember him. The reason for me going down personally for myself, I'm ready now to pay my respects, put a bit of closure on the whole reason for the conflict. For me personally, I need to go, I suppose in layman term, have a chat with, have a chat and put closure on the whole thing, really, to be fair.
I don't think there'll ever be closure. I don't think ever I'll forget or anything. I'll always carry Clark in my heart forever. But I'm hoping that it'll help me sort of, I don't know, maybe put away some of the demons I carry around. Still.
I got asked today or this evening what was my expectations. I haven't got any. I know my dad's there. I know he's waiting for me. Peace and quiet, solitude for me, a bit of closure, and pay my respects. And I can walk away different, come back bigger and better than I am already. I'm proud that I've been out to see where he was, where his final resting place is, really.
I think really emotionally quite frightened about it, and it's something I need to do, I think.
It's actually a family of Welsh guardmen who serve with my dad. They've taken me in as their own. I'm really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it.
The following morning, the first of 6 coaches carrying the pilgrims arrives at Gatwick Airport. They have a long journey ahead of them, and many are nursing sore heads from the night before. But Paddy has the perfect hangover cure: the bagpipes. It's an 18-hour flight to Mount Pleasant Airport, and money from the big lottery fund has helped pay for this special charter.
Right, how many items are you going to check?
That one and that one.
I've got a poppy wreath to actually take to Stanley Monument. I also want to take personally the carnation spray. Each of the flowers that are on there represents each of our family or members that are still with us now that want to pay their respects. And I want to personally take it over there, the 8,000 miles, and drop it down myself.
It all seems very real now, you know. I can feel this kind of apprehension coming up inside me. It's quite nervy. I guess I equate it to an actor going on stage the first night. It feels kind of butterflies and stuff. So, yeah, it's happening. It's really happening now.
Finally, almost a day later, there's an air of excitement as the pilgrims arrive at Mount Pleasant. The commander of British forces, Brigadier Nick Davies, personally greets everyone. This is the first time back for most of them. Photographs are taken and distant battlefields identified. At the Falkland Islands Defence Force Hall in Stanley, all the pilgrims are welcomed by the island's governor, Alan Huckle.
Welcome to the Falkland Islands. I must say it seems as if we've been preparing for your visit for about a month or so. So it's good that you're here, and we're very glad that you are. You gave islanders the opportunity to continue to enjoy their British way of life, secure in the link with Britain. It's always difficult for people when coming here, when they fought in the conflict. It's often an emotional time for them. I hope it's cathartic as well. Certainly, I think the islanders want to show them how the islands have developed, how thriving they now are, and the fact that this is, by and large, due to their efforts, their bravery, and their commitment during 1982. Without the conflict, the islanders would not be able to enjoy their way of life now. I think all the veterans here have a very special place in the hearts of the people of the Falkland Islands, and they will, I know, enjoy a very big welcome.
The pilgrimage is particularly important to the islanders. They know that the veterans fought hard for their liberty, and that many of them still suffer today. As a mark of their gratitude, all the veterans will want for nothing, as the locals will put them up in their houses. Paddy will be staying with an old friend, Trudy. They used to be neighbours back in the UK, but she now lives in Stanley.
This woman is a star. She's really a star, yeah.
I've even made some Benny sausage rolls for you.
Oh, wow!
It's the first full day of the pilgrimage.
Does anyone want to go anywhere and they haven't got a driver?
Over the next few days, the veterans will travel to various services in a convoy of 75 vehicles driven by the islanders.
I need to get a few. Who's green? Here we come.
The pilgrims have only been back one night, but it seems to have had a positive effect.
I think last night we were all in a bit of awe. There was a lot of emotion and a lot of cuddling, and a lot of boys, I don't know if you've noticed, but just standing, stopping, looking around. It's absolutely wonderful to be back.
My goodness me, I actually slept for 5.5 hours last night. That's something for me, wow!
It's just as well Paddy's had a good night's sleep, as this morning is the most important and difficult moment in the pilgrimage for him. He will play the pipes at a memorial service in San Carlos, and will then play at the spot where his friend, Stephen McAndrew, was killed.
We're just all heading, as you see, in convoy over to a San Carlos settlement, and that's where the military cemetery is. It was where Mac got killed, and for me personally, I'm going to have my full Highland kit on for piping at the main ceremony, but I'm going to go across to that very crater where Mac got his fatal injuries, and I'm going to take the feather bonnet off and put my green berry on, and I'm going to pipe a personal lament for Mac, and I've got a little Royal British Legion poppy cross which I'm going to put down in that spot. So that for me is going to be the really the main thing of this whole pilgrimage for me, is to give my tributes to Mac. And I've had a life where he hasn't, and yeah, I want to give thanks for that.
As the convoy makes its way out of Stanley, it's not long before they come across reminders of the conflict. These are the remains of an Argentine helicopter which was attacked on the ground by British jets. San Carlos Bay. On the 21st of May 1982, this is where British forces, having been at sea for almost 7 weeks, finally landed on shore. It was a huge amphibious operation, and over 5 days, Argentinian jets swooped down and bombed 17 British ships, as well as the troops on shore. It became known as Bomb Alley.
You read the books about it and it's nothing like this in the book, you know what I mean? It's beautiful here.
Yeah.
But you read the books of the pilots and things like that, and it's totally different. You wouldn't believe there's such beauty could be held in the book.
It's stunning, it's stunning.
It's a lot warmer than it was then. You never seem to forget 30 below. You know what I mean? The wind chill in that.
Give these pipes one last blow.
Having changed into his Highland No. 1 uniform, Paddy makes his way to the cemetery. For this morning's service, he has composed a pibroch, a military tune especially for bagpipes, as a mark of his respect.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
When they surrendered in Goose Green, we were the first ones to march in there. These people came out to greet us with lots of booze and things like that. I'm sure you've seen on the TV. And Sally and Al that actually took our platoon in as the one looked after us when we were there for a few days. Sally actually bathed me feet because they were in bits.
When he came in that night, I stuck a basin of water, didn't I, and sat him on a chair and soaked his feet and washed them for him because he was in such a state. It was awful, wasn't it?
Brilliant. And we've come back to stay with them now.
They'll always be our heroes. Always, yeah. Well, if they hadn't came, where would we be today?
Albert, when he came out
the
community centre, he had a bottle with him of Bacardi. And it's still in the house now. And he said he'll break open the bottle the day we come back. And that's what we did this morning before we came here. And we still, the bottle's there.
That's why I've got a nice warm glow in my tummy.
A little away from the cemetery lies San Carlos settlement. It was here that Paddy's friend Mac died.
I was stood in the scran queue. My platoon sergeant tapped me on the hand, said, "Paddy, get down." And as I was dropping to the ground, I was aware of this shadow going overhead, and as I looked up, I could see the bottom of the Skyhawk and the bomb coming down from the Skyhawk, and the pilot had his mask on and he was looking over his shoulder, and I thought, oh, this is my name on this shit. And mommy, 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 and I was straight into the ground, and that just went on forever, and I can still see the grains of sand in the ground now, and those were my last words and last minutes on this earth. And the boys were digging Mac out by hand, and they pulled him out arms and legs, and they pulled him just down to the side of that little hill a little bit, and Colour Sergeant Green from MT Troop started putting first field dressings on him, and of course this is where the guilt comes from, and there's no other thing to use except an expletive, and I was thinking, well, thank fuck that's not me. And you know, I regret that, and I have to live with that to this day. But the guilt and the shame cuts through, and you feel that you've let the brotherhood down. And of course, it's not letting the brotherhood down. I've spoken to so many guys in similar situations, and exactly the same words have been used time after time after time. From then on, I just withdrew into myself, somehow or other trying to deal with that sort of guilt and shame of letting the brotherhood down. And as the land campaign started after that, we had Goose Green and so on and so forth. And I was sat over in that little hut, and all the time I was thinking, I'm glad I'm in here because I'm safe. And I've regretted that, and I've struggled with that for many, many years. I've been in therapy for 12 years now, and I've had to learn a lot of things, and I've fallen over many times and picked myself up again, been picked up by other people. And I think just coming here and doing this, I've come 8,000 miles with #1 Highland uniform. I've stayed off the drink, and I'm doing something very personal here. And each time I start to sink into that stinking thinking, that confused thinking, that negative spiral, I've got more tools to remind myself, well, no, I'm not a failure. I didn't let down the brotherhood. I've come here afterwards to pay my respects to the guys that have fallen, and that's the way it should be.
The Falklands War lasted 2 months. It was a hard-fought conflict in which 250 British servicemen were killed. The Argentinians lost 649 of their men, and some of them are buried in this cemetery near Goose Green. 25 years later, and a visit can still be difficult for a veteran, so why come?
Curiosity as much as anything, in respect, obviously they were soldiers the same as us, but emotionally it's pretty blank. There isn't really much here. Unfortunately, they caused the death of friends and left people maimed and physically and mentally injured, and that, particularly on the pilgrimage, seeing a lot of friends still suffering today, it's hard to have any sympathy for the people that are here. And I think more so that the fact that the Argentinians themselves wouldn't take the bodies back and bury them in mainland Argentina, and that the fact that they're still here, I think it's pretty outstanding that they have a memorial like this to them, and it's tended like this. As I said, it's very hard today. We're in San Carlos paying respects to our own dead, and then to come here, it's a tough, for a lot of people, it's a very tough thing to do. I felt sympathy even back then when we started rounding up the conscripts, finding that we had 15, 16-year-olds that really weren't properly trained. I actually felt sympathy back then for some of the people that we were capturing and taking prisoners of war. The regulars, the Marines that were down here from day one, very different feelings for those. I mean, there was definitely, I don't know how you describe it, less than friendly feelings towards those particular gentlemen.
This is Fitzroy, where one of the most tragic events of the Falklands War occurred. On the afternoon of 8th of June, Argentinian planes swooped down and bombed the ships Sir Galahad and Sir Tristram as they were docked offshore. 50 men from various units were killed during the attack, but the Welsh Guards bore the brunt, losing 32 guardsmen. One of them was John's father, Guardsman Gareth Griffiths. This morning, he is seeing where his father died for the first time.
So the ship was up here, and we were on the corner in the headland there, and this headland covered the ship.
Yeah,
so
but you couldn't see the ship, because when we came on the shore, you couldn't see the ship.
No,
and that's what confused me.
Later today, George Miller, a former Scots Guard who fought for Mount Tumbledown and a sufferer with PTSD, will join fellow veterans on that mountain, which will be the most important part of the pilgrimage for him. But this morning he wanted to join other mourners at the service to commemorate the Welsh Guards.
We meet here today to recall the events of the 8th of June 1982, especially the bombing of the Royal Fleet auxiliary ships Sir Galahad and Sir Tristram.
For some, this is an emotional time as they remember what happened that afternoon. Derek Twigg, the Minister for Veterans, has flown down from the UK to join the pilgrimage. George was on shore during the attack, firing at the Argentinian planes, and has always felt remorse at not stopping them.
It was my job in '82, was air defence for everybody, and the Galahad and Sir Tristram, I feel personally that I let them down on that day. Although we did get them in the end, we got them at the wrong time.
After the service for the Welsh Guards, the 7 members of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary are also remembered.
We recall, Lord, that your first disciples were men of the sea, They knew from experience the perils of the deep, and we remember those of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary and others who were killed or hurt in the events we commemorate today.
During the tragic events of that afternoon, the Royal Army Medical Corps lost 3 of their men. The medics had been in the process of disembarking from the Sir Galahad to set up a surgical centre when the Argentine jets attacked.
By loyalty and hard service, after the example of St. Luke, the beloved physician, we may be found faithful in ministering to those that need. For his sake who went about doing good, the same thy Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Trying to get out of the Galahad was very, very difficult. We were just going through a passageway. One way behind us was completely on fire and it was filling up with smoke, so we had to get right down almost on our hands and knees. You could feel the heat on some of the hatchways going into the tank decks. I knew that wasn't a way out. And we got more or less to the bow of the ship and couldn't really find a way out. And that's where I actually thought, this is it. And I remember being incredibly calm at the time. I guess it was adrenaline or whatever. And what had happened, the Galahad had been bombed the previous week in San Carlos water, but the bomb hadn't fused properly and slammed through the deck, leaving a hole. And it had been covered by tarpaulin. Now someone had obviously removed that tarpaulin, and suddenly we saw some light come down. And we managed to crawl out through the bomb hole made by the Argentine bomb the previous week. Yeah. When I got up onto the deck, by this time I think a lot of people had mostly gone and there was hardly anyone left on board. You know. I really started to panic, and so I went to go and jump over the side, and I remember a major, I think he was Royal Corps Transport, grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and said, "Don't jump in the water, you'll freeze," you know. Many of the life rafts had already gone, and there was a young Royal Marine Corporal bought a Mexafloat, you know, like a floating pontoon they use for unloading, alongside the Galahad, and about the last 30 of us got off on that, and there was quite a lot of very seriously wounded on board. I also remember the ammunition on the ship was starting to explode, and I don't know whether they were shells or whatever, but they were actually coming through the hole underneath us. And I was thinking, you know, we really need to be leaving here now, you know. And this chap slowly took us away. It was quite difficult to get away from the Galahad initially. And I'm always struck by the view I saw as we approached the shore, and the thing was just well alight by this time. The majority of the casualties came ashore here. And I remember going up to settlement and walking into the community hall, and I had to walk straight back out again because there was all these the smell of people who'd been burnt. You know, it was quite overwhelming. I just panicked and went out again. Then I remember seeing a lot of the Chinese crew, which I hadn't actually seen on board the ship because we're only there a day. We didn't realise that many of the crew were Hong Kong Chinese merchant navy guys, and they were all coming up the beach, many of them very badly burnt. And I remember finding a hose. Turned it on, and they were all standing around me in a semicircle, and I was hosing their hands down, and it was just chaotic, but we managed to get a lot of casualties away very quickly. And approximately an hour later, if you remember, a second Skyhawk came over, and I just stood up and looked at it. I wasn't in the slightest bit bothered. And there was the paratroopers, two para were dug in behind us, and they opened up with everything they'd got. And I even remember one guy, I don't know if he was a chef or something, he had a LMG, which was basically a modern version of a Bren gun, running down the field, swearing his head off, firing from the hip, you know. It was quite bizarre.
To Roger, Scouse and Kenny. Roger, Scouse and Kenny. I was on board, and I took the party ashore with I had to get my blood and my generators ashore and my radios to set up the field hospital here at Fitzroy. So that's why we took the first boat. And I took surgeons as well, you see, and it's very sad. I was standing on the helicopter deck with Roger saying, "See you in 10 minutes, bloke," you know, and gone. So, and Scouse and Kenny, but they were down on the tank deck, you know, and he was up on the helicopter deck. And it was a day like today. just like this. 16 Field Ambulance. 16 Field Ambulance. 16 Field Ambulance was the biggest field ambulance because it had the parachute clearing troop as well. So it's the parachute clearing troop of mine, 36 men, who were detached from me and put on to 3 Commando Brigade and travelled down on Norland. And they were the backbone of the red and green life machine you read about. And there were, I believe there were 2 naval surgeons, naval anaesthetists there. But all of the rest of it was, they were my paras. So actually it was 16 Field Ambulance, this is for the camera, that did the entire medical support for both brigades. And I'm very proud of them. You know, they were magnificent, they really were. We put through 69 casualties on Harriet Day, Harriet and Longdon, and we put through 62 on Tumbledown. Altogether in 8 days we put through 439 casualties, all through surgery. I mean, some of them were just a plaster and a kiss, you know, but the others were more serious.
Although the loss of the Sir Galahad was a blow to British forces, it didn't slow their advance towards Stanley. Just 3 days later, the Marines of 4-5 Commando launched a night attack on Two Sisters, a heavily defended ridge on the approach to Stanley. 8 British soldiers were killed, but the Marines had helped seize the momentum.
My main recollection is sort of going up the slope to the right, and it was surreal because nothing was happening. We were just sort of walking up as if we were out on a sort of Sunday stroll, really, wasn't it?
Different than the Sunday strolls, I remember.
And then next minute there was an Argentinian must have seen something and chucked a flare.
Well, we could see them, couldn't we?
Yeah.
I can remember seeing figures in the rocks.
Yeah.
I see it on the flag. Yeah. I could see light. Well, we were that close, weren't we?
So this flare was thrown, and that sort of everybody hit the deck, and I think that was the ideal, because they then opened up, and it was all hell really. Yeah. And initially I thought, well, we're going to have a lot of casualties with that amount of fire coming down, but because everyone had hit the deck, a lot of the fire had gone over our heads.
We caught in that divot, weren't we?
Yeah,
we just caught in a bit of a small.
Yeah, so obviously the rounds were just going straight over, and then next minute the artillery and mortar shells were coming in, and that was quite a fearful time, because you actually hear the whistling of the rounds coming and the explosions, and that is what we took most of our casualties. And our troop officer John Davis was injured quite early on, and Chris Jones was a Royal Engineer, was killed by an artillery shell. We were pinned down for what seemed like ages, didn't it, initially, before somebody then said, you know, to continue, which obviously seemed mad, because it was quite safe where we were lying, but we obviously had to
prepare to move,
up.
Wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was the order.
Prepared to move, and we sort of moved up through the position with sort of contacts through until we took the feature some hours later. But yeah, a far nicer day today with the sun shining.
During the battle for Two Sisters, the Marines had been supported by a naval bombardment from HMS Glamorgan. But the following morning, and only 2 days before the Argentine surrender, HMS Glamorgan was struck by an Exocet missile. 13 crew members were killed. But because she didn't sink and would eventually make it back to Portsmouth, her story has largely been forgotten. So today, 7 members of the Glamorgan have come back to remember their lost friends. They've been invited onto HMS Clyde, the Falkland Islands patrol vessel, by a commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Paul Pitcher. She will sail out to where the Glamorgan was hit for a memorial service. But first, there's a chance for the VIPs to see how technology has changed in the years since they left the Navy.
I've got echo sounder over there as well, calling out depths. Lever operator, quartermaster, and then in the corner there is all the engineers there. We don't have a separate machinery rooms.
That is normally a camera screen. We've got 7 cameras on board the ship, one for each of the main machinery spaces, got one for the flight deck for flying operations, things like that. AVCAT pump space, because that's obviously a high risk compartment.
Guys up in the nav doing boarding ops, you can see the vessels coming in, and they don't need to call them on VHF 16 all the time. And also, just you see someone out there and you're a bit unsure what he's doing. You can get his name and calling out the VHF by name rather than vessel in position 52 degrees north, 43 degrees south. Everybody's looking on the chart going, is that me?
Good morning to you. We're gathered here today in the presence of Almighty God. We've come to remember those who paid the ultimate sacrifice in 1982 in the service of their country while serving aboard HMS Glamorgan. We also come today to give thanks for the life of Chief Petty Officer Roger Harding, who served on HMS Glamorgan during the Falklands conflict. Sadly, he died on the 11th of May this year, and it was his wish that his ashes be committed to the sea in this place. For many, the memories of 25 years ago are very painful still, but I know that for some, if not many, that this pilgrimage has been a time of healing, a time for burdens being lifted as you've met up with former oppos and made new friendships. Some of you have got to the islands to actually set your foot on that land for the first time. And it's my prayer that as you return to the UK, that you'll continue to know God's healing in your lives. We have entrusted Roger to God's merciful keeping, and we now commit his ashes to the deep.
Whose arm doth bind the restless slave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea.
We've always had that feeling that we were a little forgotten because of really the date that we were hit. It was the day before they surrendered. So when it got fed back to the UK, it was sort of lost in all the hula of the celebrations of the success of the taking of the islands.
We've talked to people on the island, and it looks like we're going to get ourselves a permanent memorial, yes, which is going to be excellent, and that'll be a good place for everyone else from the Glamorgan and their families and of the ones that died to be able to come down and pay their respects and to visit and reflect on what happened down here.
When I applied to come here, I didn't think I'd get the chance, and you know, now I'm here and done it all. It's just the icing on the cake, really, and it's you know, I got to see or got to say goodbye to another shipmate. So it's been a brilliant day.
During the conflict, HMS Ardent came under 2 ferocious attacks by Argentine Skyhawks. She lost 22 of her men before she finally sank. Today, former crew members of the frigate have come to pay their respects over the site where she sank, now a recognised war grave. This is where the costliest land battle for British forces took place, Mount Longdon. It was taken by 3 para, and it's where Sergeant Ian Mackay won the VC. But the paras lost 23 men as they fought from trench to trench. Today, Gus Hales, who fought with 9th Parachute Squadron, the Royal Engineers, has chosen this battlefield as a fitting location to place a statue of the Buddha. Buddhism has helped Gus back from the brink after years of suffering PTSD.
And I remember coming here 5 years ago and seeing a plaque to 3 young lads. 2 of them were 17 and one died on his 18th birthday. Today I have a 16, 17-year-old daughter myself, and I'd look at her and she's a baby. All those years ago I saw these guys, if you like, as comrades. But now as I've got older, I kind of look on these 17-year-olds as my children. So I'm going up there today. I'm a very different man 25 years on. I discovered Buddhism, which helped kind of get these thoughts into perspective and to take a path of peace. So I was going to what's called Amravati Buddhist Monastery, and the community there knew I was coming back on this pilgrimage, and they gave me this brass Buddha image, and I thought, where can I put it? And it just seemed the fitting place, Mount Longdon. Having found Buddhism and how much it's changed my life. This is the zenith of that moment, to leave a Buddha here as a symbol of enduring peace. And that's a really joyful moment. That, yes, we get caught up in wars, yes, we get caught up in all these unwholesome and unskillful behaviour, but there's always hope. And whenever we practice anything, and I think all religions are pointing to this, is that ultimately love and peace is the way. Buddhists don't really pray in that respect. They just have this kind of overwhelming wish for all living beings to be happy. And that's something I reflect on every day, to develop compassion and gratitude within myself with that unshakable desire for all living beings to be happy. And maybe it's fitting to put it here to anybody who visits this spot. Stop worrying, stop suffering, be at peace with yourself and be at peace with everything around you. With that act, that the war's over. It's truly come to an end and I can now move on.
The final phase of the war was fought on these rocky hills and ridges just west of Stanley. On the night of the 13th of June, the Argentinian commander ordered his most formidable battalion, the 5th Marines, to stage one final stand on Mount Tumbledown. The 2nd Battalion, Scots Guards, were given the job of taking them on. It took 12 hours of brutal fighting before the Guards finally won, but they lost 8 men.
Now is the big thing for the Scots Guards. We've done everybody else, done Welsh Guards, we've done the San Carlos. This is for the Scots Guards boys to find their skeletons and get rid of them, say goodbyes, sit and have remembrances, lay our plaques, you know, just generally, after 25 years, put someone to rest. It's either going to do two things. It's either going to send me completely scatty, or it is going to help. But I don't know. I don't think coming to an island and putting things to rest is going to help me brilliantly. You know, because I'm still going to have them issues, and they just don't go away. They're there for life.
George provided machine gun support that night for his friends who were fighting their way up the mountain. Now, 25 years later, he's returning with other veterans of the battalion. Joining them are relatives of those who died, including Teresa Davison, who lost her husband Clark, and other pilgrims and islanders. With the weather deteriorating, the vehicles struggle to make it up the mountain, but they finally make it and the service can begin.
Steve, who was with right flank, will read the poem O Tumble Down, which was written by a platoon commander in right flank, Mr. Matheson. It will then be followed by the Lord's Prayer from Simon, who's with left flank, the radio operator for Major Kisley. Then it'll be the last post, 2 minutes silence, followed by Rivali. Then it will be the pipers who will play Tumble Down, and that will be the signal from those who would like to lay a wreath to come forward. Would anybody like to add anything else?
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
From all of the Scots Guards, thanks for supporting us, thanks for coming.
It was the Guardsmen of the Crown who scaled the heights of Tumble Down and fought that night a bloody fight to see victory by dawn's first light. From crag to crag amongst the rock, they skirmished on, numbed by shock. Through shell and mortar fire they moved, till at last the ground they'd proved. Port Stanley lay there, just ahead, as they began to count their dead. But where the glory, where the pride, are those 8 brave men who died? They who made that lonely sacrifice, and through each death paid the total price, in their final and heroic act, did surely speed the warring parties' pact. Each one who there his life laid down saved countless others from their own unknown. So those of you who live to talk, let your pride hover as does the hawk, and never let men these acts forget, nor the memory of our dead neglect. But once returned across this sea, remember then just what it was to be a Scots Guardsman.
Cheers, lads.
25 years on, and it's summer, and it's snowing, and it snowed 25 years. It was like this 25 years ago.
Well, a bit windy.
Big fella up there's looking down on these guys there, like. I'm not making a big issue about it, but I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And when I woke up the next, and so does he, and so do a few others.
Yeah.
But the next morning, 6 o'clock yesterday morning, when Patrick come up to pick us up and take us back, I felt like a new man. I felt I've got rid of all these demons out my head, all these angry thoughts, horrible stuff for 25 years, and I feel like a new man. I do. I feel like, you know, this is the best therapy in the world.
I feel really good. I don't know how I'm going to feel when I get back to the UK. I wouldn't say it's fixed me or sorted me out, but it has given me an insight that I'm not the only person, you know, and I've got a lot of the lads in the battalion the same as me. I think I would have been upset with myself for the rest of my life if I hadn't have come, but yeah, I am glad I come now. I am absolutely delighted to come.
Before the main body of the Scots Guards attacked Tumbledown, a diversionary attack was launched by their reconnaissance platoon. During a heavy firefight lasting over 2 hours, 2 soldiers were killed, including Sergeant Danny White. Today his former colleagues remember this larger-than-life character.
They were all in the bank here, and there was between 6 and 8 trenches along here, and we worked to it because the initial contact, the first burst of fire came from over there, and we were all in extended line, all the way back to that bank, and from there we worked our way round this ridge, taking out the trenches one by one. Whilst from the trenches behind us they were firing in. Right. And then they started calling, as they started to give up these trenches.
So where did you get hit, Stephen?
Where did I get hit?
Yeah, where?
Oh, just over that ridge.
That's what Beth when you get hit there?
Yeah, just over there. There's a flat rock, because we heard the hand grenade come out of the trench and roll onto the rock. Couldn't see it, so we just rolled up on a ball, and you know, I thought it was a dud. I went like that, took my hands away from my face, and it went bang.
Even today, an unexploded Argentine grenade still remains where it landed that night 25 years ago.
Did you think that this attack was a successful attack?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
The whole idea was the Argentine force believed that we were coming from that direction.
That direction.
Towards the tumble down. So the battalion put under diversion attack to this location. When they got to, this is as far as he got. Our drill sergeant was killed there in the corner. Our piper was wounded over there by grenade shrapnel. Once he'd bugged back out again, we moved in back to a minefield, and 2 of the guardsmen. No, I wasn't here.
You weren't. No, this was purely the pipers.
There was 25 in
guys,
the attack.
Yeah.
And out of the 25, 16 were wounded and 2 were killed.
2 were killed.
It was about, it looked like 10'2" to me, this fella. About 5 foot wide. And it was like silver hair, spot on. He was a real guardsman, this fella. But then again, he used to bollock the hell out of us. You know what I mean? He used to bollock the hell out of us.
We all stood outside the barbers, and we all stood with our hands behind our back because he came along like, you know, nice Scots guardsman. And he walked past his pay stick. Remember how beautiful and big he was with his pay stick, and he marched past and he said, "What the fuck are you 5 doing?" And we said, "Getting haircuts, sir." "It's 30 below, fuck off!"
With so many memorials taking place, everyone welcomes a chance to relax and unwind. Throughout the week, the islanders throw several parties. They're delighted to have the veterans back and thank them again for their liberation. The Governor holds several receptions at his residence to ensure that not one pilgrim misses out on some official hospitality.
We've actually organised 3 receptions because we can't accommodate 250 at one go. So we've had 3 receptions for 85 people plus other guests. And it's an opportunity for them to meet islanders who were involved in the conflict. And I think they're all having a good time.
On the final Saturday, all the pilgrims gather for an evening remembrance service. They will march to the Liberation Monument before going on to present 2 memorial benches to the people of the Falklands. But first, there's an opportunity for a group photo.
Gentlemen, all you've got to do now is smile. Wait, please.
With their photo taken, the veterans are treated to a short recital by the Stanley School's choir. This week, the islanders have accommodated the pilgrims in their houses, driven them to anywhere they wanted to go, even up snowy hillsides, and constantly fed and watered them. So today, the pilgrims want to show their thanks by presenting the islanders with 2 memorial benches, which will stand as a permanent reminder of this trip.
For those of us who took part in the conflict in 1982, it was an experience that we shall never forget. But on this 25th anniversary, for those of us who were in the task force, the warmth, the reception and the generosity of the people of the Falkland Islands on our return has been almost overpowering. And in order that you don't forget us, we have offered these benches from this pilgrimage and the members of this pilgrimage in order that in the future the people who are now young will be able to look out on this scene with the beautiful islands before them and reflect on the past and look forward to an inspiring future. Thank you very much.
Veterans! Veterans! Stand!
Sir, can I have your permission to call up the veterans for liquid refreshment?
Veterans! To the nearest public house! Yes! Best!
It's the final day of the pilgrimage, and the Remembrance Sunday service is taking place at Christ Church Cathedral in Stanley. All over the forces world, those lost in war will be remembered, and today's service will allow veterans and islanders to get together and remember those who lost their lives during the Falklands conflict. A number of dignitaries have come, including the Governor Alan Huckle and the Minister for Veterans Derek Twigg. Commander British Forces Brigadier Davies is also here.
The reading is St Paul's Epistle to the Romans chapter 8, verses 18 to 25. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For in hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, We wait for it in patience.
As the service progresses, there's an unannounced contribution from Gus, who feels an important voice is not being heard in today's formal proceedings.
I would just like to say, on occasions like this, humble soldiers are very rarely ever asked to say anything. I'm not on the programme, but I'd just like to say this. We heard from the Veterans Minister. 308 young men have committed suicide since the end of this war. And most of them committed suicide because what they saw is the neglect of the politicians. So I have a small poem to say. Every year, on Remembrance Sunday, I sit in the corner of a British Legion bar, dressed in blazer, shirt, regimental tie, polished shoes, with my head held high. But deep in my mind, where nobody goes, I see a wooden cross where the wind of victory blows. 3 cheers for victory, I heard the politicians say, but they never asked me about my victory. And if they did, I would have explained it this way. It isn't your flags or your emblems of war, or your marching of troops past the palace's door. It isn't Mrs. Thatcher on the balcony high, reaffirming her pledge to serve or die. But it's the look and the pain on a teenager's face as he dies for his country in a far-off place. It's the guns and the shells and the phosphorus grenades, the dead and the wounded, the freshly cut graves, or a grieving wife with a fatherless child whose young tender life will be forever defiled, or the alcoholic soldier with a shattered mind who takes the suicide option for some peace to find. Well, that's my victory, but no one knows if it's deep in my mind where nobody goes.
Although Gus's intervention wasn't expected, it seems to have struck a chord with fellow veterans.
That has been the most moving part of the week. It was absolutely fantastic.
We can put it in the snippet.
It was for people like you. People like you. It's important.
It's all of us, mate.
Yeah.
All of us.
It gets lost, doesn't it?
Yeah. Didn't they, though?
I stopped going to Remembrance Sunday a long time ago to services like this, because the establishment kicks into place and the story of the humble soldier or the grieving parent or the sister and brother is kind of lost. So I wrote that poem with that intention, and it just sat there all through the service, really nervous, thinking if the moment presents itself, I'll just go for it. And I got up and I just went for it. The war doesn't end on the day of the ceasefire. And to have some compassion and put the structures in place where people can be treated for psychological injuries, can have a self-respect and can move on from things like this to live fruitful and productive lives.
But we're very supportive of combat stress, and we've increased their funding now from January next year by 46%. So we're very sure, that we want to support them, and bringing back veterans here is clearly helpful for many of them. But also, I extended the medical assessment programme, which is based at St Thomas's Hospital, where they can get a mental health assessment back to 1982. So Falkland veterans can actually get this assessment from what will be a person who's a psychiatrist who's served in the military himself.
The last few years I've seen the career of Mr Twigg. And he is, yes, he does seem to be a compassionate guy, and he does seem to be moving in the right direction. But he needs to do more, and he needs to let people know in our places that the war just doesn't end on the day of the ceasefire.
In the final act of remembrance this week, the pilgrims visit Memorial Wood. 10 years after the war, it was planted with 255 trees, one for each serviceman killed, and for 3 islanders who also lost their lives. And it also marks the location where John Griffiths can lay his wreath to his father. The 25th anniversary pilgrimage brings to an end this year's commemorations. This week the veterans were able to come back to the Falklands together as a group to visit the sites where they fought alongside each other, remember the mates they lost, and to share their emotions.
I'm immensely glad I came. I'm very proud that I came out with the lads. I'm proud I could support them in whatever way I can, and they supported me. I'm immensely glad I came.
From my point of view, it's been a tremendous success. It's been a cooperative venture between the committee in the UK, led by myself, and the committee in the Falkland Islands, led by Gary. And I think it's been hard work, but it's been a great success, and I think we feel very, very happy with the way things have gone.
The people here have been absolutely tremendous. Even the police, they just laugh at you when the boys have been drunk, like, you know. And it's just fantastic to be back. It's quite sad to go, but to be honest, I'll be glad to get in my big bed, because I forgot how small army beds were because I stayed at the barracks. But it's been absolutely, the people have been wonderful, a wonderful experience.
Visiting this island has been truly wonderful. Really enjoyed it. The people are so wonderful, so nice. Yep, really had a great time.
It has brought together the islanders and their liberators, some for the first time. And it has also allowed family members to visit the sites where they lost their loved ones. It was 7 days that will never be forgotten.